guys! Today we'll be covering the manhwa, I'm in trouble because the Emperor thinks I'm terminally ill. If you enjoy the video, please remember to like and subscribe so we can bring you more awesome recap content. As you might have guessed by the title, our story starts with a girl who gets mistaken for having a terminal illness. Seems like kind of a specific thing to mistake, if you ask me. To figure out what happened, we need to go 6 months back from the present day to an ordinary evening, much like any other. Our protagonist, Lindell Bodabanche, is vice leader of the Imperial Guard, returned from a day of sparring, exhausted and ready for bed. But she noticed something off. Immediately, she withdrew her sword and challenged the stranger to reveal themselves. Only it wasn't a person. At least, they didn't seem to be a person. More like a spirit, though they called themselves the Black Dragon, otherwise known as the Black Larocque. The strange presence materialized into a beautiful but sly young lady and offered Lindell a deal. She wanted her, one of the greatest knights in the Empire, to become her personal contractor. Sounds like a bit of a step down from Imperial Guard, don't you think? But of course, the deal wasn't that simple. If Lindell agreed, Larocque promised to grant her deepest desire. Anything, even things which would normally be impossible. She could wish to live forever or become Empress of the world. Just so long as she agreed to make a contract with this very suspicious spirit lady. I don't know about you guys, but I would have gone running for the hills already. These kind of deals are always more trouble than they're worth. Lindell was smart enough to know there would be a catch and forced Larocque to reveal her quest. Her task would be to find Larocque's real body somewhere in the world and break the seal upon it. Uh-oh, that can't be good. They don't put seals on dead people for no reason. Larocque can't tell her why she was sealed away, but explains that she only has 1 year to exist as this form, a temporary body made of mostly mana. If she agreed, Lindell will have exactly 1 year to break the seal and have her wish granted. To be honest, Larocque chose her target well. Not only is Lindell a master with a sword, but she also has a lot of wishes. As the illegitimate child of a noble family, she has always wanted recognition by her father for her talents and success in life. And yet, no matter how high she climbed, he never acknowledged her capabilities or considered her a part of the family. So of course she accepted the contract. Only it led to a very strange and unpredictable scenario. Now we get to see why the Emperor thinks she's terminally ill. It turns out that accepting the contract also gave her the power of the dragon, which is so powerful that it makes her vomit blood while she's adapting. But it's not a bad thing, it's just a little side effect. Unfortunately, she didn't get a chance to explain that when the Emperor noticed her symptoms. In fact, he got all intense and ordered her to never leave his side. She did try to convince him that her body is perfectly healthy, but this guy doesn't seem like the type who listens. Clearly, he cares a lot about Lindell because when he found out, he stripped her of her position and ordered her to be moved to the Northern Palace and not allowed outside. That seems a tad melodramatic, don't you think? This is not how Lindell was expecting the situation to go. If you hadn't picked up on the hints already, she's been in love with Emperor Sionel Ulysses Woodburg since long before he took the throne and dedicated most of her life to serving him. But if this is how he repays her hard work, I'm thinking Bestie might need a new crush ASAP. Fast forward to a few days later, and a fearful-looking maid comes creeping into her new quarters to offer breakfast. This girl's name is Luna, and she's a personal maid dedicated to Lindell's service. Lindell tries to refuse, but she hasn't eaten in days, and Luna is insisting. Besides, everyone thinks she's sick, so they're extra concerned for her. But that's just the problem. This lie is eating away at her, especially since the person she cares most about believes it. She has to find a way to talk to CNL, and so far, the only tactic she's come up with is to refuse her meals, hoping that he'll come in himself to check on her. But when Luna announces that the head chef made duck soup especially for her, she can't resist. It seems like the whole palace is worried for her, so wouldn't it be selfish to refuse? At least, that's what she tells herself. And really, who can blame her? I'd probably do the same. Luna is delighted and starts setting the table immediately. She keeps saying that Lindell needs to eat to help her body fight off the illness. Little does she know that staying in these fancy quarters and being doted on like this is the real danger to her life. If the Emperor keeps true to his promise, then she'll be stuck here, unable to find Larocque's body before their contract is up. 6 months have already passed. It's not like she's got extra time to kill. But first, Luna's right. She does need to eat. Lindell is about to dig in and have her first meal in a week when the Emperor himself arrives at last. What brilliant timing. Lindell drops her fork immediately and goes back into loyal knight mode, kneeling before her emperor. Damn, she really is down bad, huh? CNL sees the untouched plate of food and thinks she's still refusing to eat. He has this terrifying look in his eye and keeps saying intense things about how she's trying to end her own life. Lindell slaps his hand away and tells him for the 1,000th time that this is all a misunderstanding. She's perfectly healthy. But it is a little hard to explain the whole vomiting blood thing. She keeps silent even when the Emperor brings forward a skilled healer and orders him to find out what her illness is. For obvious reasons, he can't figure it out and throws himself on the ground in defeat. Is everyone in this empire this dramatic? Seriously, these people all need to chill the heck out. Lindell defends the healer, telling the Emperor this isn't his fault. She switches tactics, hoping that if he thinks she's a hopeless cause, then he'll just let her go. I think we all know how that's gonna go down. As expected, the Emperor ignores her even when she insists she can't be cured. He promises to search the entire world for a healer that can fix her and orders her to stay here and recover. Lindell refuses. As she points out, they no longer need her. CNL has taken the throne, the Empire is strong and thriving, and its people are happy under his rule. There's no one for Lindell to protect him from, so now she has no purpose. That sounds kind of sad, but in a weird way, Lindell seems relieved. She's been with him ever since they were little, and always kind of bugged him by refusing to leave his side. She even thinks he might be happy to let her go. Of course, there's one pretty major thing she's missing. Lindell plans to return to the palace after completing this contract. But as far as the Emperor knows, she's on death's door. Sounds like she's giving up her life, happy to let him go and never see him again. And that is obviously not something he would be happy about. Furious, he orders everyone except Lindell out of the room. He looks so mad, I wouldn't be surprised if he finished her off himself right now. Poor Lindell is, understandably, scared, but the Emperor seems more hurt than angry. She was the one who helped put him on the throne, and now she just wants to leave? She still doesn't get how serious he's taking this. She's starting to wonder if he actually cares about her a lot more than she realized, but it still comes as a complete surprise when he starts to cry, asking if she's afraid of him. Oh, well, this took a very different turn to the way I thought it was going. He can't believe that she would have fallen sick and kept it to herself. He's the Emperor, after all. He could have found her a healer before things got serious. He could have saved her. Oh God, she really needs to tell him the truth. This is all coming as a pretty big shock to Lindell, who hasn't tried to hide her feelings for CNL during the time she served him. He, however, always kept his distance, so much that she thought he didn't like her and just wanted to keep their relationship professional. Maybe he was hiding his heart this whole time, or maybe faced with her death, he's realizing how much she means to him. Either way, he's not ready to let her go. Kneeling in front of her, he takes Lindell's hands and commands her to stay by his side, and keep acting the same as she always has. With a guilty look, she pulls away and refuses. Obviously, the whole contract with an evil spirit is the main problem here, but she finally speaks her mind. He's always seemed irritated by her. She even goes so far as to say he hates her, so there's no point in her sticking around and causing more trouble. As if things couldn't get weirder, CNL starts to laugh. It's kind of adorable, actually. For a cold-hearted emperor, he can look really cutesy when he wants. To prove her assumptions wrong, he pulls her in for an embrace. He doesn't say exactly how wrong she is, but I think we can all tell she means a heck of a lot more to the Emperor than she realized. At the moment where she's most confused, he quietly confesses that he loves her. What? Okay, I think we all knew he was crushing, but love? Where did that come from? And just how blind does this girl have to be not to have noticed before? Lindell thinks she must have gone mad, but he answers her questions, confirming his affections for her. This should be the moment she starts jumping for joy. Our girl just escaped the friend zone for the first time in decades. But this adds an unexpected complication to the contract she signed. Remember how LaRoque offered to make her deepest desire come true? Well, the wish she made was kind of based on her thinking CNL hated her. Now he's offering to make her the Empress. The entire course of her life could be about to change in a big way. I guess she didn't need to make that contract after all. Especially because one look in CNL's eye says it all. This guy is not going to let her go easy. He didn't even formally propose or ask if she wanted her to marry him. I guess that's an emperor for you. He just does what he wants. Doesn't matter what Lindell might say. But that doesn't mean she won't protest. As she points out, even CNL can't just marry whoever he wants. The nobles will have more than a few things to say about their emperor marrying the illegitimate child of a count. That crazy look comes back in his eyes and he shuts down the conversation. He's made his decision, that's all there is to it. Which is kind of unfair. Not only has he chosen Lindell's life and husband for her, he's also condemning her to a very difficult role. The Empress might not have as much power as her husband, but she's still under a lot of scrutiny and has to work very hard to maintain her position. That's not exactly the kind of future Lindell was hoping for. She's already done her years of service as a knight. But even worse than all that is the limits it would put on her contract. If she doesn't find Larocque's body and break the seal, then she'll be dead in 6 months anyway. But the more she refuses, the more stubborn the Emperor gets. He doesn't care if it makes her hate him. He doesn't care if he's being selfish. What the Emperor says, goes. And the Emperor says she's staying. The second he leaves the room, Lindell starts to freak out. It's kind of ironic how he thinks he's keeping her in the palace to save her life when actually he might be causing her death. Our poor protagonist doesn't get a second to herself before Larocque appears, just in time to have a pillow thrown at her. Lindell immediately asks her to cancel the contract, but it doesn't exactly work like that. Contracts are pretty binding at the best of times, but signing one with an evil spirit called the Black Dragon? Well, if you ask me, she's locked in it for life. Larocque also doesn't see why this turn of events is a bad thing. Didn't she just become the future Empress? She can just sneak out, break the seal, and come back to live the rest of her days in luxury. But apparently, it's not that simple. The magical barriers surrounding the palace are made with incredibly strong magic. It would take a genius wizard to break them. If someone like Lindell tried to escape, let's just say she wouldn't have to worry about the contract anymore. After hearing this, Larocque seems to relax. If it's a magical problem, then it's no problem. After all, this is the Black Dragon herself we're talking about. It won't take much for her to break some puny human barriers. Or at least, that's what she thinks. To her horror, the magic surrounding the palace is too much for her skills. This empire is ruled with those of the dragon blood, after all. That magic has been strengthened for generations. You can't even use magic in the palace, just healing powers and brute force. Now, Larocque starts to panic. She even accuses Lindell of seducing the Emperor. I guess she hasn't realized what a lunatic he is. Now they're both in a difficult position. They have to think of a way out. Lindell comes up with an idea to utilize the loopholes in the contract. After all, Larocque can come in and out of the palace, so there must be some pretty powerful magic in the contract itself. She asks Larocque to summon the contract so they can comb through it for something useful. Suddenly, the Great Black Dragon gets all timid, claiming it would be too long to read through the whole thing. Apparently, she didn't show Lindell the entire thing when she signed it. Uh-oh, looks like somebody got scammed. Big time. According to Larocque, it's nearly 2,000 pages altogether. Lindell only saw 13. So she really had no idea what she was signing. Who knows how many other clauses she agreed to without knowing? Like any reasonable person, Lindell is furious. But she's also desperate for a way out. So she sits down to shuffle through all 1,700 pages looking for a way out. It makes her regret signing the damn thing in the first place. It turns out her wish was to help her win over CNL's heart. Isn't that funny? She wished on something that had already come true. She just didn't know it. All of this is a lot to take in one day, and she's starting to get stressed. In the middle of her yelling at Larocque, Lindell starts coughing up blood again. Is this a sign that the symptoms are prompted by her emotions? Now she's even more frustrated. While she goes to wash up, she asks Larocque to clean up the room. They've left it a total mess. The floor is almost completely covered in paper. Before either of them get a chance to clean up, there's a knock at the door. Looks like they've got a guest, and it's the leader of the Imperial Guard. Larocque vanishes in a heartbeat, leaving Lindell to clear up the room and hide the contract. She only gets about 2 steps before stubbing her toe against the wall. It's so painful that she starts to yell out, and of course, then the leader of the Imperial Guard comes running in to check that she's okay. Shrain Impaster is very close with Lindell, so naturally he's horrified to find her hunched on the floor with blood all over her shirt. He immediately summons a healer, and the cycle starts again. Yikes, who knew one little side effect would be so troublesome? She somehow manages to convince him not to call a healer, but he's still concerned. It's like everything she says is just more proof that she's terminally ill. He's being unusually out of character, even offering to help her to the bed so she can lie down. Lindell promises she can walk herself just fine, but because of the whole foot-bumping incident earlier, her legs have started shaking. Yeah, there's no way he's gonna believe her. Even when she says the blood on her clothes isn't a big deal, he just thinks she's trying to act calm so he won't worry. Honestly, there's no way out. As if all that wasn't enough, there's another misunderstanding brewing. Shrain is convinced Lindell couldn't have made all the mess herself, and he knows CNL visited just before him. So now he's worried the Emperor threw a tantrum or made her so upset that she threw one. He asks if she still has feelings for CNL, and she doesn't bother denying it, even though he is a controlling psychopath. For the first time, though, she gets to share the good news. The Emperor loves her back. Shrain suddenly gets all weird and cold, and Lindell worries she was boasting too much. Is he jealous or something? What the heck is that look in his eye? Is everyone in this manhwa totally insane? Before she can ask what the heck he's staring like that for, her maid Luna comes rushing in and starts weeping in her lap. Looks like another person has joined Team Terminal Illness. Judging by the state of her room and the blood on her shirt, she's certain her mistress has reached her limit and thrown a tantrum out of frustration. She goes on this whole rant about how she knew Lindell was only pretending to be a lazy slob who laid around all day and ate like a pig. Ouch! Pretty sure she was just enjoying an opportunity to relax. She is an Imperial Knight, you know. No matter what Lindell says, Luna is convinced, and this whole demonstration has set Shrain off again too. Honestly, at this point, I'm starting to think she should just give up. It's kind of touching that everyone cares about her so much, and maybe if she accepts their help, she can get everyone to relax and find a way out of this palace. With Luna staring fiercely at Lindell, holding her hands tightly like she might fade away any second, you might think she's just as crazy as the rest of them, but she's genuinely motivated by concern for her mistress. There was one night when she first got confined where Lindell couldn't sleep and kept staring out the window. She said the same as always, that she was fine and this was all a misunderstanding. But she also mentioned how people just believe what they want to believe and there is nothing she could do. Luna reassured her, telling her about all the people who are worried for her. And it's not like Lindell wasn't grateful. She's lucky to be surrounded by such good people, particularly Luna. She even says she wishes they could be together for a long time. She's developing a bad habit of saying things that make it seem like she's dying. It's no wonder no one believes her. Her maid is convinced that she's just repressing her own pain to keep those around her from feeling sad. It only makes her more loyal to Lindell, determined to find any way possible to keep her around. After all, she spent her first week in confinement just lazing around and refusing to eat. She didn't realize it was only because the doctor-approved food was gross and she didn't feel like doing anything. Lindell tries to explain that now to Luna and Shrain, but they just think her body is too messed up to have an appetite. Well, if they're really so desperate to misunderstand her, then she might as well take advantage of it. Putting on her best sick patient impression, she asks them all to give her some time alone. Once all the busybodies are out of the way, Lindell can finally wash up and relax. She can also give some more serious thought to the many problems that have sprung up. It's becoming rapidly clear that there's no point trying to solve the misunderstandings about her illness. The most important thing right now is the contract and finding a way to fulfill it. But as soon as she has that stack of paper in her hands, Lindell feels defeated again. Maybe there's another way she can work around this, like negotiating with CNL to let her leave the palace. Are you sure, bestie? Don't we remember how that turned out last time? Apparently, she does remember, because Lindell gives up that idea and goes back to reading her contract. She ends up spending the whole night reading through the contract, but has still made barely any progress. I guess it's time to go and face CNL. She'll just have to get past the guards outside her room and also hope that no one sees her eye bags and causes another misunderstanding. But what do you know? That's exactly what happens. Luna walks into the room and has the shock of her life, talking about her face is ruined from the lack of sleep. That's a little harsh, don't you think? Lindell tries to brush her off, but Luna grabs her firmly. She's hoping she can make a break for it if she just doesn't raise her suspicions. That is, until she notices that the guards at her door have increased. Apparently, the Emperor wasn't happy that his captain of the guard came to visit without permission. From now on, he's been barred from visiting, and her new guards seem even stricter than the last. No matter how much she insists on seeing CNL, the guard steps in her way and refuses to move, following his Emperor's orders to a T. Well, desperate times call for desperate needs. If they think she's sick, then so be it. With a stroke of inspiration, Lindell clutches at her heart and pretends to feel faint. As she predicted, the guards start to swarm around her, providing the perfect opportunity for her to leap over them and land like a well-trained ninja towards the door. And they still think she's terminally ill? Really? Unfortunately, her break for freedom is short-lived as she runs into just the man she was looking for. Uh-oh. If he was angry before, he's going to be furious now. For a moment, CNL is too stunned to speak. He asks what she's doing here, and when she can't answer, that crazy look comes back in his eyes, and he holds her tighter. Before she can explain herself, the guards arrive and immediately apologize for failing to follow his orders. They even ask for the death penalty as a punishment, because apparently, no one in this manhwa has any chill whatsoever. Not wanting them to suffer for her actions, Lindell distracts His Highness by calling him CNL. I guess that's the first time she's ever used his name instead of calling him Emperor. Unfortunately, it doesn't have quite the effect she was hoping for. She insists she was only coming to see him and wraps her arms tight around him, insisting that she missed him. She's half worried he'll be offended. I mean, I know he basically proposed to her, but she's never acted so clingy with him before. Maybe it won't go down well. Oh, never mind. Look at the way that boy is blushing. He's totally smitten. At least we now know his weakness. Before the two of them can get lost in each other's eyes, the guards clear their throat, reminding them they're not alone. CNL promises to come and visit more often and asks that she doesn't come out of her room in future. Which is pretty much exactly the opposite effect of what she was hoping for. She tries to persuade him that she's fine to go outside, but as always, he's stiffer than a brick wall. In another world, it could be kinda cute. He just doesn't want her to get hurt or make her illness any worse. He even slumps on his shoulders like he's trying to guilt trip her into obeying. Well, two can play that game. With her fists clenched, Lindell tells him she feels so lonely and stuffy being cooped up in that bedroom all alone. Maybe it will even make her health worse. It's certainly having an effect on her mental health, that's for sure. This at least does get through to the Emperor, who apologizes for making her feel abandoned. He promises never to make her feel alone again. So from now on, she'll live by his side in the Emperor's palace. What? That's not even legal! He can't keep a woman he's not married to in the Emperor's palace. The nobles will revolt. Now this problem has spiraled way out of proportion. Should she just give up and accept her fate? If she's staying right beneath the Emperor's nose, there's no way she'll be able to read the contract, let alone try and sneak out. And this will only add fuel to the becoming an Empress issue. In front of all the knights and nobles, Lindell reminds him that she's not worthy to become an Empress. From out of nowhere, a young general pops up and cuts her off, saying there's no one more qualified than her to become the Empress. Has anyone else proven their love and loyalty for the Emperor the way she has? A load of nobles suddenly appear out of thin air, including Lindell's family, who give their support for taking the position of Empress. Wait, is this a dream? What is going on? CNL uses them as proof to show her that the nobles would accept her as the Empress. Did he invite her family and all these nobles just to make a point? He's certainly stubborn enough to do that. But if there's one person more stubborn than him, it's her. In front of everyone, Lindell slaps his hand away, causing a minor outrage among the gathered nobles. Before she can explain herself, her nose starts to bleed, dripping blood onto the carpet. Great. I think that is literally the worst timing imaginable. Half the palace just saw her have a nosebleed, which is probably just because she's exhausted from staying up all night. But they don't care about that. And they don't care about anything Lindell has to say. Guards start running for a healer, and the next second she's scooped up in the Emperor's arms. He doesn't want to hear another word from her. And frankly, it's hard to say anything when you're pressed against the chest of the most powerful man in the Empire. Doesn't hurt that he's so handsome either. The next thing she knows, Lindell is taken to the Emperor's own bedroom and tucked up in bed with a small army of maids and guards surrounding her. Like anyone would be in this situation, she's a little embarrassed and tries to tell him to go back to his work. Shouldn't an emperor have better things than standing and looking at a sick girl all day? Apparently not, and her concern for CNL has just got her even more points as a potential empress with the maids. I'm seriously starting to think she should just give up. Everything she does just makes it worse. At last, the healer arrives and places a recovery spell on her at once. It doesn't do anything, obviously, so she asks him to stop, not wanting him to use up all his mana on a fake patient. The poor guy seems genuinely distressed, which is understandable. She's making him seem like a quack, like the reason she's not recovering is because he's a bad doctor. That's definitely what CNL is thinking anyway. Even when the doctor insists the nosebleed was just from fatigue, he somehow spins it to make her out like some fragile little doll. I don't know about you guys, but this is getting ridiculous. Does anyone else think she should just tell him the truth? Maybe if he knew her life really was in danger, he would let her go complete the contract. The doctor asks a few more questions about her symptoms, particularly shortness of breath and having no strength in her legs. Kind of vague symptoms, but for some reason a light bulb goes off in his head and he diagnoses her with a twisted soul. Maybe he really is a quack. Of course, everyone around her takes this very seriously, and the Emperor asks him to explain. Since the doctor couldn't find any source for her illness, he's turned his attention to conditions that develop over time before showing their symptoms. He spent hours and hours in the library researching anything that matches Lindell's condition, and eventually he discovered twisted souls, a condition that only comes from being cursed. Oops, how did he figure that out? Technically, Lindell isn't suffering a curse. Her body is being changed from the inside out to make her wish come true. But the truth is, it doesn't look a lot like a curse. And maybe that's how the contract works? Perhaps this hidden curse is what will kill her if she fails to fulfill the term of the contract. The only thing that doesn't match up is the timeline. The doctor said twisted soul symptoms only reveal themselves in patients who've been cursed for a long time. And as she accidentally reveals to the entire room, hers only happened recently. Everyone goes silent. The doctor doesn't seem surprised that she already knew. After all, it's pretty hard to get cursed by accident. But the Emperor is furious. He can't believe she didn't tell him. It doesn't make sense. Until the doctor provides a perfect cover-up story. What if Lindell sacrificed herself, taking on a curse that was meant for the Emperor from one of his enemies? And actually, it does kind of make sense. You see, CNL always had aches and pains, problems with his health when he was younger. Then after he met Lindell, they just magically disappeared. Which is kind of spooky. You can see where he got this whole narrative from. It's the perfect story. The Emperor's dedicated knight who shielded him from a curse and stayed by his side, knowing that one day she would die for him. It's so sweet that even the maids have started crying. The only problem is, it's not true. Not even a little bit. But you can't tell that to CNL. He's fallen hook, line, and sinker. After all, she was always trying to protect him, warning him about his countless enemies and promising to protect him with her life. Now he sees what she was trying to do. Slip away so she could die quietly with the burden of all the curses she took on for him. He's so invested in this fantasy that he starts crying. More than anything, he wants to know who's responsible for these curses. The doctor chimes in, suggesting the previous empress. For a bit of context, CNL was actually born of a maid. The true empress, his stepmother, despised him, plotted against him, and even tried to have him killed once or twice. She also had a sorceress on her side, making her the perfect scapegoat for this cursed crime. Everyone's completely forgotten about Lindell now. They're so invested in this story they're inventing. The doctor claims the only way to save Lindell would be to find the Black Healer. Sounds ominous. Apparently, there's a famous sorcerer in the South Seas who is known to treat souls. As far as the learned doctor knows, only the Black Healer could save a case like Lindell. After this dramatic scene with the doctor, the story runs right across the Empire. You can see why it gets so popular. A young girl who sacrifices herself to save the emperor she loves? It's practically Shakespeare. The rumor spreads like wildfire, and soon Lindell has lots of visitors from the royal guard. Some of her old friends were genuinely shocked to hear the news, and they're just as ignorant as the rest, not listening to a word she says when she tries to explain. At least CNL is being less of a psycho and more of a lovebird these days. Actually, he's a bit extreme, even carrying her to the bathroom and back. The girls are all jealous of how well she's taken care of, especially how dedicated he is to finding this Black Healer so she can be cured. Half the Empire has been enlisted in the search. Schrain has taken the lead for the Imperial Knights, seeing this as a mission on behalf of their future Empress. The Knights start asking about the curse and how she managed to save CNL. When she tells them it's all a lie, they don't believe her, and she ends up throwing a fit and kicking them out of her room. Fair enough, I'd be frustrated too. Later that evening, CNL comes to her room to go through some documents. And before you get excited, no, nothing happened between them. Like a dutiful boyfriend, the Emperor comes to see her every night, but he never takes his eyes off his work. She asks him why he sent the Imperial Guard out to search for the Black Healer. Their duty is to stay at the palace and guard the Emperor. If their numbers start to dwindle, then he'll be in danger. CNL just finds it sweet that she's still worrying about him and doesn't take her concern very seriously. What else is new? He never listens to her. He asks if there's another reason for her concern. Like, love, maybe? Like any girl would, Lindell gets all flustered, partly because he's got her pinned on the bed beneath him. Unfortunately for us, the tension diffuses quickly, and they start talking about what attracted them to one another. Lindell admits she thought they were similar, being lonely, illegitimate children and all. She tries to find out why CNL likes her back, but he acts all coy and won't say. I have a feeling we'll get the full story one day. Over the next few days, Lindell tries her best to make another dent in the contract and gets a visit from LaRoque. She seems a little different this time and admits she might have to go away for a few days. Some urgent business came up, which means she won't be able to help Lindell read through the contract. Not that she was much help anyway. It's a bit frustrating for our poor knight, whose life is still very much on the line. Over the last 6 months, they searched through every corner of the Empire and decided her body must be in another country. That means the search to break the seal is only going to get harder. She needs all the help she can get. LaRoque doesn't explain, but she can't delay this trip. After a moment to think, Lindell calmly tells her it's fine, she can go, which comes as a bit of surprise to the Black Dragon. It's not like she has much reason to trust her, after that little stunt she pulled with the contract. LaRoque is touched by her faith and promises to return as quickly as possible. She leaves Lindell with Estelle, a rare medicine made only by dragons that can cure any ailment and keeps her body in balance. Might come in handy if she has any more blood to cough up. Of course, it's also very dangerous to humans and might give her even more side effects, so, as usual, the Black LaRoque has been more harm than help. Once she disappears, Lindell and Luna start discussing plans for the National Foundation Day. Lindell accidentally lets slip that she's tired, but since she hasn't even left her room, Luna freaks out and calls the doctor back again. Oh no, not this old coot! He's the craziest of them all! They play the usual game where Lindell insists she's fine and the doctor makes up something even more ridiculous than the last time to validate his own theories. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to think he really is a quack. His latest theory is that she's in so much pain that she can't actually feel any of it. What kind of nonsense is that? Lindell is so desperate to prove herself that she invites him to test her. With quite a lot of concern, the doctor presses her hands to see if she can feel the pain. The only problem is, he's weaker than a baby bird. He's literally shaking with the effort, but Lindell hasn't reacted. Well, duh, she was a knight. She's gonna have a pretty high pain tolerance. Give her some credit. Lindell is convinced he's joking and asks him to press harder. That only makes his theory more believable, especially when she flies off the handle in rage. The doctor goes on a whole nother speech about how she doesn't have much time left and they need to find a healer ASAP. Lindell can't listen to another word of it and storms out of the room. At least this time, she makes it around the corner. But like before, she's found. This time by Sir Oscar Borabanche. Yes, you guessed it, he's Lindell's half-brother. They don't exactly have the best relationship, partly because he's so cold and heartless. Though they are technically family, these two have less in common than distant relatives. If anything, that's why it comes as a surprise when he sympathizes with her situation. He even offers a shoulder for her to lean on. Well, this is weird. As if that wasn't enough surprises for one day, he also reveals that her father, the Count, has put in a huge number of troops to search for this black healer guy. Askell tries to walk her back to her room, but she doesn't get 2 steps before she faints. Okay, this is kind of freaky. Is it just me, or does anyone think LaRoque left her that medicine for a reason? She knew her symptoms were going to get worse. And speaking of LaRoque, guess who's there when she wakes up? The Emperor and the Black Dragon make an unlikely pair. For a second, Lindell thinks she's dreaming, and I don't blame her. They're already bickering, which is starting to grate on Askell. He must be the one who brought her here, wherever here is. But the strangest figure of all is a little boy standing beside her. What the heck is a kid doing here? As soon as CNL sees she's awake, he walks over and orders the kid not to touch her. Her brother says the same, which seems a little harsh. Feeling threatened, the kid pulls closer to Lindell and whines that the adults keep bullying him. Obviously, she has no idea who this kid is, but she still defends him in front of the Emperor and asks him not to be so harsh to a little boy. That's when CNL reveals that boy is not as innocent as he seems. For a moment, she thinks he's just jealous, but when she looks back, the child has grown into a full-sized adult male. A very nicely sized adult male, if I might add. He seems surprised that she doesn't know who he is already, but just as he's introducing himself, a voice pierces her subconscious, asking her to wake up. Suddenly, the scene changes. Her brother, Larocque, and Askal all disappear, and all she can see is the Emperor weeping while holding her hands. The only person who seems to know what's going on is this hooded figure. Annoyed by the interruption, he tells her to go back, wherever back is. Whether she wants to or not, he's certain they'll see each other again. With a click of his fingers and a slightly creepy parting smile, Lindell is sent back to her real body, where she wakes with a gasp. Just as we suspected, CNL was beside her. He's clearly been crying. His hands are shaking too. Looks like she gave everyone a bit of a shock. Lindell is, understandably, a little dazed, so the Emperor explains. He brought her to the temple of Lute, the god of the dead. Not exactly somewhere you want to wake up. They must have thought she was in a pretty bad way to bring her here. Slowly, it starts to sink in that all of that was a dream. The little boy in the robe, Larocque and CNL, even Askal, none of it was real. And on top of all that, she's been brought to the temple of Lute instead of the temple of the god of life, Ursula, where sick patients normally go to be treated. The keen-eyed amongst you might have also noticed that Lindell is in a different outfit. A very fancy outfit. Eventually, CNL tells her what happened. Lindell pretty much died. She stopped breathing, so there wasn't any more the healing priest could have done for her. That's when they brought her here. The priests of Lute claim her spirit has now stabilized, which is how she ended up back in her body. Sounds like a load of baloney if you ask me, and Lindell feels the same. She starts getting all worked up about what a fuss these crazy people are making, and tells them all to stop spreading nonsense. But it's not nonsense to CNL. He was so worried and begs her not to be angry, pulling her into a sudden hug. He seems different from... I don't think we've ever seen him looking so scared before. Seeing him so afraid makes Lindell take a step back. But she still thinks he overreacted by bringing her to the temple of Lute. She was probably only out for a minute or two, right? Wrong. Lindell hasn't been breathing for 3 whole days. Now you can see why he was panicking. Poor CNL is so teary-eyed he can hardly speak. Which is understandable considering he literally thought she was dead. But this doesn't make sense. Why did she end up fainting? Who was that guy she saw? Is he part of the contract somehow? Or is this a whole separate issue? My head is starting to spin. Lindell jokes that this must have been her funeral since she's dressed all pretty and there are so many people gathered around. Obviously, the Emperor doesn't respond very well to that, but they don't get a chance to talk anymore when a new arrival walks into the room. Judging by the other priests' reactions, this dude is not popular. Whoever he is, the Emperor hates him too, but he seems to be in debt to him somehow. I guess this guy had something to do with bringing Lindell back. In fact, he says so himself that he was the one who saved her life. Is it just me, or does he remind anyone else of that guy from her dream? Despite performing such a marvelous feat on the future Empress, this man feels he's not being celebrated quite as much as he deserves. He finds it funny that no one trusts him and asks if he did something wrong. It's hard to tell what happened while she was out of it, but clearly the Emperor feels very disrespected by this man and warns him that this kind of thing won't happen again. Well, yeah, I hope not. It's not exactly a casual thing to just stop breathing for 3 days straight. Lindell finally realizes this guy must be the famous Dark Priest. Clearly, they need him around to keep Lindell alive. Somehow their lifelines have become tied together. If she falls, so does he, but if he dies, then she does too. Poor CNL must be struggling with that. His favorite thing is threatening to cut someone's head off. Noticing Lindell's curiosity, the Dark Priest kneels down to introduce himself formally as Melan Crostan, taking off his hood to reveal, well, a pretty handsome face, if you ask me. Who knew servants of the God of Death could have such a good jawline? A little stiffly, Lindell thanks him for saving her life. She asks if he's a dark priest, and he says no. Just as they're getting acquainted, Sionel interrupts and orders him to put his hood back on. I guess he also noticed those mesmerizing eyes. Lindell can tell her man is getting worked up, so she changes the subject by asking how exactly he saved her. The Emperor tells the story of how desperately the palace priest tried to bring her back. They still couldn't find the dark priest, so when all else failed, they turned to Lute for the spiritual powers of his followers. That's when he met Melane, whose abilities are similar to those of a dark priest. Basically, he can tie spirits back to their bodies and keep them anchored. Lindell's spirit was about to leave her, so it's thanks to him that she was brought back. This must have been the type of thing LaRoque had in mind when she handed over that medicine. Though it wasn't exactly useful in the end. It doesn't matter what medicine she has if she's not breathing long enough to take it. According to Melane, her soul has yet to fully settle back into her body, so he wants to take some precautionary measures. He asks everyone to leave the room, and to their surprise, the Emperor agrees. He promises to wait right outside, and a moment later, he's gone, leaving Lindell with the creepiest man in the Empire. As soon as they're gone, Melane takes off his hood and accuses her of not being a human. Wait, what? Is this something to do with the contract, or… Lindell is just as confused as we are, but before she can say 2 words in her defense, Melane grabs her by the throat, lifting her into the air. Sionel? You might want to step back in, buddy. While she's half suffocating, he explains that any human will die the moment their soul leaves their body. The fact that she survived 3 whole days without her spirit means that she cannot possibly be a human. It's impossible. And what does he think she's secretly pretending to be? A dragon. That's right, he thinks the greatest knight in the Empire is actually a dragon like LaRoque. Could this have something to do with the contract? Maybe LaRoque has left some kind of imprint on her soul that's making this guy confused. Lindell tries to protest, grabbing his hand and telling him not to speak nonsense. But he doesn't move an inch, convinced that she's lying. That's when Lindell notices his eyes. They've changed. In fact, they look distinctly like LaRoque's eyes. Does that mean he's the one pretending not to be a dragon? Lindell is literally seconds away from death. This crazy guy seems to be enjoying her struggle, joking that she's not especially strong for a dragon. Yeah, because she's not. Gosh, why can't he get it through his thick skull already? He lets slip that the room is sealed with magic, meaning no one can hear what's going on or even enter until she's dead. For a second, it looks like he's really going to follow through on that promise, but then he lets her go. Lindell drops to her knees, coughing. The next second, he's all up in her face, asking why her dragon scent is so weak. She's not particularly strong either, as evidenced by the whole nearly choking her to death thing. He's asking all these questions as if she knows the answer, as if she can even catch enough of a breath to answer him in the first place. Because she's not speaking, he starts to fill in the blanks himself. Since she's currently in human form, he's thinking she's a hatchling, a baby dragon, but that doesn't explain why she's so physically weak. As soon as he stops running his mouth, she butts in and tells him the truth. She's not a dragon, she's just a normal human girl. Melane doesn't believe this for 1 second and starts asking how she ended up alone. A mother dragon wouldn't have abandoned a baby as weak as her. That's what really tips Lindell over the edge. She yells back that she never had a mother, not one that cared enough to stick around anyway. And she hardly has a family either, considering they've always treated her like an illegitimate outsider. And now he turns up, talking about her being weak and trying to strangle her to death? Lindell doesn't have a clue what's going on, but she assures him she won't go quietly. Now Melane pivots. He still believes she's a dragon, but can't understand how she ended up on her own. Dragons are famously a selfish species, but they have put a lot of emphasis on family. If she was orphaned, another herd would have taken her on. Lindell is in the middle of telling him to stop spouting nonsense when another one of her coughing fits come on. Now will he believe her? Surely it's not normal for dragons to start coughing up blood. Melane suspects this symptom has something to do with her soul separation, but he also seems to believe she really might have been abandoned as a hatchling. I guess that happened to him too. He asks how she ended up with this condition and whether a dragon did this to her. It feels like this is going to lead to one heck of a misunderstanding, but Lindell says yes, because technically that's true, right? She's starting to get a little freaked out by Melane and his intensity, but he won't let her go. He says he wants to help get revenge on the ones who tried to kill her. which is kind of a crazy thing to say to a girl he just strangled half to death. To her surprise, Melan seems very upset by this, like he doesn't want to become the people he despises. He tries to explain himself, but a rumbling from outside cuts him off. The next second, there's an explosion at the door and CNL bursts in. Wait, did he do that himself? Even though the door was sealed with magic? I guess Melan underestimated the dragon heritage of the Emperor. And he might be about to get another taste, because the moment CNL spots the marks on his fiance's neck, he summons a firestorm and takes the first shot at Melan. Oh dear, this could get very bad very quickly. He may have the actual blood of the dragon emperors running through him, but he's still no match for an actual dragon. Lindell tries to run in and stop him before the situation escalates, warning CNL he's not a human. But he already knew. I'm not exactly sure how, but it doesn't seem like Melan told him. That's not the kind of secret you let slip, especially not to an emperor. He knew the whole time. Actually, it seems like he still knows more than he's letting on. He didn't want to bring Lindell here, but he had no choice. Of course, that doesn't mean he'll let this slide. He sends a torrent of fire toward Melan, who narrowly misses the blow. Rather than being scared, Melan is impressed. CNL has better abilities than he'd expect of a human, even one with dragon blood. But the servant of Lute is more interested in how he found out about his heritage. Clearly, CNL isn't in the mood to talk. He shuts Lindell in a mana barrier, keeping her protected so he can fight alone. Which is hella chivalrous, but maybe not the smartest idea. Why is the Emperor even going up against this guy if he knows he's a dragon? That's an obvious win for Melan. The two of them go head-to-head with their magic, each blow more impressive than the last. Even from behind the mana field, Lindell can tell her future hubby is struggling. She has to step in and do something before someone gets seriously injured. Suddenly, Lindell is lifted into the air by a warm sensation. Her aura must have returned, which is kind of weird. She hasn't been able to use it since she signed the contract, so why has it come back now? There's no time to ask questions. She yells at the boys to stop this stupid fight and breaks the mana barrier with one clean punch. Pretty badass, don't you think? She steps towards them, warning them not to keep making a scene or else she'll step in. The threat doesn't exactly work though, because the next moment her legs give out. Is she not strong enough to be using her mana again yet? It all vanishes in a heartbeat, and suddenly Lindell is exhausted and her body feels like lead. CNL rushes to her side immediately, and she starts coughing blood again. This comes as a real shock to Melan. As far as he noticed, there was nothing wrong with her condition except the spirit separation. CNL asks him what the problem is, but since this creepy priest can't give him a real answer, he orders him to go and fetch a priest to use their healing powers. There's a big gust of energy when he glares at Melan, which makes me think maybe our Emperor isn't a straightforward human either. I mean, this dude just held his own in a battle with a dragon. Shouldn't that be pretty impossible for a normal human, even if he is the Emperor? Back to Lindell. Although she coughed up a lot of blood, she doesn't feel dizzy the way she used to when these symptoms first started. Her body must be changing faster than she realized, but whether it's changing for the better or worse, we can't tell just yet. For now, they've decided to drag back that silly old man priest, the one who came up with the famous story about her taking on a curse for the Emperor. What nonsense will he cook up this time? The priest, at least, has enough sense to yell at CNL and Melan. They definitely shouldn't be picking a fight in front of a girl who just spent the last 3 days outside of her body. She needs rest, not this kind of tension. Even the ground was shaking. He also points out the bruises on Lindell's neck, which is a great point. I can't believe they're not freaking out more about this, because that is straight-up attempted murder. To everyone's surprise, Melan apologizes and asks about the curse Lindell supposedly took on for CNL. She tells him the same story she's told everyone else, that there is no curse, her spirit is perfectly fine, and this is all just a massive misunderstanding. She asks him to explain that to the others, but it turns out he can't actually detect the status of a spirit, just whether it's in a body or not. Well, he's pretty much useless then. I mean, what kind of skill is that? In his opinion, the priest's story about a curse makes the most sense. Even if it's not a curse, there's definitely something distorting her spirit, which sounds crazy to Lindell. But they do know of a case where a victim's spirit was distorted, causing such severe bodily harm that they eventually died, and all without the spirit leaving a trace. He asks Lindell to be totally honest with him so that he can help save her. For obvious reasons, she doesn't exactly trust him, but he apologizes and promises to do his best before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Are we sure he's not just a kooky con man? After Melane's disappearance, Lindell rounds on the Emperor, asking why he left her alone with a man he knew was secretly a dragon. CNL is frustratingly vague and doesn't explain how he knew or why he trusted the servant of Lute. All he can say is that they still need Melane, and that he definitely knows more than he's letting on. After they return from the temple, things kind of go back to normal. CNL resumes his position as the Emperor and gets very busy very quickly. National Foundation Day is just around the corner, so there's a lot of work to be done. Lindell goes back to spending most of her time alone in her room, which would suck if she hadn't just got her aura back. Since she is used to honing it with a sword, she picks up a candlestick to test her abilities and see if she's returned to full strength. Extending her aura is easy enough, but it seems to have a time limit. She can't keep it up for more than 3 seconds, and her legs give out straight after. And she seems to cough up blood each time she uses it. Just in time for Luna to come running in and have a mini meltdown once again. She seems upset that Lindell won't lean on her and never calls for Luna when something goes wrong. And she won't accept that Lindell just doesn't want to bother anyone. In the end, the once famous knight promises to call for her maid or a guard if anything happens in future. Just then, CNL comes rushing into the room. The first thing he sees is the blood on the floor and he immediately gets mad. She jokes that she was just trying to work out with a candlestick. In fairness, if he doesn't want her to do stupid stuff like this, he should really let her outside. At least a couple times a week. He doesn't listen, and once the priest arrives, he storms out to discuss with a guard. Turns out, these two have been trying to figure out what she's doing inside this room, and they both saw the traces of aura on the candlestick. But that doesn't make sense. Coding a non-sword item like a candlestick is incredibly difficult, and Lindell barely has enough energy to stand up these days. The Emperor just can't figure out what she's up to. That is, until Luna comes to offer up some information. And that's it for today, guys. What did you think? As always, don't forget to like the video and comment for the next part so we know you want more. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for updates. See you in the next one!